At the time of the Renaissance, the thought process started changing. And thinkers like Bacon and all, they, uh, their opinion was that evidence-based science backed by experiments is the actual science. All other are folklore, mythology and all. So, uh, formerly in Europe, there's only less than 500 species of birds. But when once the colonization started, Europeans were everywhere. They started collecting. They started seeing new birds, new species of birds. Then generally they thought that the current knowledge about birds is not sufficient enough. We have to know more about birds in the other countries also. Like Bacon said, true knowledge came from observation and experiment, not from just hearsay. John Ray and Francis Willoughby, they were the pioneers of modern ornithology, we can say. There were birds and observed birds and all that. And in 1676, Willoughby suddenly expired at the young age of 30 or 37 or so, I think. Then his friend John Ray, luckily all his notes were well preserved by his wife, Willoughby's wife. Then John Ray collected all these notes and he published a book in Encyclopedia of Birds. So ornithology. It was in Latin. It was in 1676. Then the same book was translated to English in 1678, and this book even contained a basic the cover of that book. And at that time, another stream of knowledge came into force in Europe. It's called physico-theology. So even scientists were afraid to deny God. So John Ray was the major propagator of this thought also. So in his argument, God created everything perfectly, and it's our duty to decode it, resolve it, and interpret it. So formerly, the older thinkers like Descartes, and they thought all creatures except human beings were just soulless automata. They are just mechanical things. They don't have an intelligence of their own. They have no soul. So this physics made it work like a what you call the mechanical watch or something. So then John Ray wrote a book named The Wisdom of God. Wisdom of God magnified in the when it works by in the way of creation. So John Ray was able to raise a lot of questions. For example, why do birds to answer? That was the basis of modern ornithology, actually. Inspired by John Ray in 1809, William Paley wrote another book called The Wisdom of Gods. Actually, it was Paley who who said that all creations are like a mechanical what do you call a timepiece or something, a watch or something. So later, recently, Richard Dawkins had written a book, The Blind Watchmaker. So he was referring to this book, actually. Then Darwin was very much inspired by William Paley. So actually, generally he is given the credit to for this theory, but actually it was John Ray who proposed the theory. So after John Ray's time, two types of ornithologists were created. The first was the systematist, and the other was the field ornithologist. So for almost 200 years, it was mostly taxonomy. Systematics was the main study of ornithology. So specimens of birds were collected from all over the world. It was stocked in the museums of Europe and America, and then they were classified. And by that time, Carl Linnaeus had classified almost all organisms. So generally, taxonomy was considered as the real ornithology, and amateur, all other field ornithologists were considered as amateurs by taxonomists. And it is said that even the taxonomists had a common hatred towards field ornithologists at that time. So a lot of change came after these 200 years. It was Erwin Stresemann who actually combined both the streams, the streams of stream of taxonomy and field ornithology together, and synthesized it into the new ornithology. Stresemann, we all know, he was the Dr. Salim Ali went to him to study ornithology at that time to get training. So as Ernst Mayr said, for 100, no one in the last 100 years has had as profound an impact on the world ornithology as Stresemann, Erwin Stresemann. So he was a key scientist who transformed the ornithology. This up to Ray you can see it's one branch, then it branches into two. Systematics is one branch and field ornithology is another branch. Then Stresemann and others combined it, and it was carried forward by David Lack that time. And there was visible change in the output also. See, you can see this graph, the number of publications on ornithology in various publications like IBIS and all that. So up to 1900 it was very low, maybe less than 1,000 per year. Then you can see an exponential areas of study: coloration, feathers and moult, systematics, faunistics in worldwide, faunistics in Europe, about migration, breeding and ecology. You can see the timing of the concentration of study. See, breeding, ecology, behavior and all that comes only after 1950s. Most of studies were in the 1950s. And the other way, systematics generally was before that. Before 1920s, it was mostly systematics. So the whole approach towards ornithology changed with that. And now we can take separate areas of avian biology. Origin of birds also. In the not much given attention till late 1980s, but lots of new fossil findings were discovered after that, and the technology also changed of that. In 2011, there was a landmark discovery. The first feathers, typical feathers, was found as a fossil sample in Canada. It was dated as 70 to 80 million years ago. So maybe the feathers originated at that time, and wind tunnel experiments and all that, and with computers, now we know a lot about avian flight, the mechanics of avian flight. This is the graph showing the fossil samples. So till 1980s, not much, but then see the increase. This one of the reasons for the increase is China also started sharing their findings and all. And another aspect is evolutionary biology. So fundamental laws of inheritance was proposed by John Mendel in the 19th century. Then in 1947, a new synthesis, a synthesis of all the knowledge that had acquired till then was combined and synthesized. It was then done mostly by a group of scientists led by Ernst Mayr, Huxley and Haldane. And after that, it was mostly lack. For several decades, it was lack. In Oxford, he had a small institute, Edward Gray Institute, which is called, and based there he did a lot of studies, and he published Darwin's finches. He studied about Darwin's finches. A book was published in 1947, and Ecology and Evolution of Darwin finches. The study was by Peter Grant, and this study is still continuing. Peter Grant and his wife Rosemary Grant continued studying this finches on Daphne Major Island in Galapagos. For 40 years they have completed study. And now the speciation of study, there is another book published by Trevor Price. It was in 2018. So this is how the evolutionary biology developed based on ornithology. This shows the history of evolutionary biology from origin of species to till now, up to 2010. And migration was another aspect which was not understood much in the early days. Now, after 19th century, it's still continuing. Bird banding, of course, was done by the citizens in Europe, in many parts of Europe, and it's a regular feature now, and lot of ring recoveries are now recorded, and we know where these birds winter and all that. And more experiments on migration, like orientation cages. Gustav Kramer's famous experiment showing a planetarium and all that. And even now, after that, the earlier satellite telemetry was not a bit cumbersome. It was heavy, and the batteries died out soon. Now, batteries with very long life is available, and even meter by meter movement of the bird can be tracked. So this is one good example of radio telemetry. All of you know this migration of bar-tailed godwit from Alaska to New Zealand, and the return migration also. Non-stop they fly 8 to 9 days, almost 12,000 kilometers non-stop they fly. It's a fantastic. Now a lot of data is available about the migration of Amur falcon also. Lot of studies are now being conducted. This is another aspect, ecological adaptation for breeding. David Lack was the pioneer in this also. David Lack actually, he has written a lot of. He was a very prolific writer, and he could explain any complex theories in very simple words. You must read these books. Some of them are still available. Like a lot of life history studies also he had done, like the life of the robin and the shifts in the tower. That's another book. All these books are still available. A lot of online editions also are available. And Lack was very, he was very lenient in receiving comments, reviews, and opinion also. Some scientists who do not like criticism. David Lack was an exception. He was not like that at all. And clutch size, that was now known as the Lack's principle. The clutch size of each species of bird has been adapted by natural selection to correspond with the largest number of young birds it can provide food. That was the theory then. It's called the individual selection, theory of individual selection. But group selection also is there. So now all these theories are all, with more studies, they are all getting improved. And instinct is another interesting aspect of ornithology. It's ethology or behavioral studies. Started by Tinbergen and Konrad Lorenz. A lot of interesting experiments were conducted by them, and they interpreted the behavior through these experiments. And imprinting, you all know about the imprinting of birds, especially ducks. That also was there. And all these theories were improved upon by later scientists. And but now we know that a lot of studies happened in this direction. Now we know that the smell has a lot of important part in the life of a bird. It's an interesting book named, I forgot its name, The Secret Perfume of Birds. It's a very interesting book. It's about the olfactory function of birds and the experiments and all that. And brood parasitism is another aspect of study. Brood parasitism of cuckoos and other birds, cowbirds and all that. And long-term studies of single species is another aspect. For example, Eurasian sparrowhawk. It has been studied for 14 years by Dr. Ian Newton. The study is still being continued by his institute, Terrestrial Institute of Ecology. Lifetime reproduction in birds, that also is a very interesting aspect. One bird marked at the time of birth is followed throughout its life, and the total output is calculated. Total offsprings it produces in its lifetime. That's another interesting aspect of study. Of course, we can still only dream of such studies, I think. Privacy studies, as I told, David Lack's study of vocalization. That now a lot of people are working on bird calls and all that. Robin Marler's studies are very interesting. A lot of studies he had done about vocalizations, and population studies also. About Ian Newton himself has written a very good book on population limitation birds. That's a very good book. So a lot of things are happening around in the world of ornithology. These are the two books that I depended entirely to make this presentation. The one on the right hand side is the 10,000 Birds, Ornithology in Style. It's a classic book. All of you must read this book. It's a classic book. It was published in 2014, I think, 2014. And an earlier book named the Wisdom of Birds. The Wisdom of God we saw, written by John Ray. He has now written about the Wisdom of Birds. Well, both of these books were authored by Tim Burkhead. So this is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashimar sir, for the excellent presentation. His presentation covered various areas like physicotheology and avian flight, evolutionary biology, bird migration, ecological adaptation for breeding, ethology, and he has also cited several areas for future studies or for ongoing studies. Thank you, sir. Attention volunteers, please collect questions from the audience that are to be asked to the presenters. Thank you. Next presenter is Dr. Pramod P. He will be presenting his paper on a brief history of Indian ornithology. Dr. Pramod, please.
Very good afternoon. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Hume Center, particularly Vishnu and Sashiat and all others who are responsible for it, for inviting me. I am very well aware that in this audience and the people who are invited for this meet, this festival, there are several people who are more eligible, more knowledgeable to talk about this subject than me. Even then, for this invitation, I especially thank you for that. So this first slide I just put because when we are talking about Indian ornithology and its history, the thing the transformation of people looking at the birds and start identifying birds actually popularized the actual bird watching in a very big way in 1983. This is that 100th year of BNHS, that is centenary celebration photograph. This is one. So when you talk about Indian ornithology and its more than ornithology, I just would like to think about the very larger the knowledge base of the birds of India. If you just start looking at it, you should just, even before the proper ornithology, there are people in the country like India where myths and stories and Puranas and folklore from the days of Yajurveda and all kind of thing. Understand that is a very different way, but we don't need to go to that level. But even then, some sort of an inclination of understanding about all these things, people had something, even in the concept of vehicles of many organisms, many of these gods, owls coming as a vehicle of Mahalakshmi. Certainly some sort of an inclination for the role of the birds owls on controlling the rats, by which they are actually saving their Mahalakshmi, or Annalakshmi, something of that sort must have been there, we can think about. But however, that is all stories. But similar way, if you just get into our literature, there are so much in Kalidasa, particularly Kalidasas, and even Tamil Nadu, our Sangha literature, several things. There are people who are working on that in Coimbatore, which I know they have talked to several of them. Kalidasa is a fantastic, should have been a very fantastic and observer of nature, because in his most of the books, Kumaravamsam, Raghuvamsam, Kumarasambhavam, Raghuvamsam, Malaviyagnimittram, Meghasundesham, Vikramorvashiyam, everything, there are some reference of some movement of the birds, particularly about the migration. He was very very specifically he has looked at the timing of the migration, and many things are even today's understanding somewhat correct in that. Similarly, Sangam literature, there are V-shaped moving of the birds and that's referred in many places. And there are even Natrine, Aganan or Puranan or Agampuram Padalgal, all those things. They have called Valasai Pothal. Valasai Pothal is literally meaning it is migration. These are there. And there is a Mr. K.N. Deve. He has made a book on bird names in Sanskrit literature. A very big book. But many of the books, still we can debate whether actually it is actually the meant, it may not be as per our present understanding, but several of them are correct. There was some mentioning of the birds in the Sanskrit literature, which was even 2,500 years old. So such kind of thoughts were there, some understanding, because people have looked at the birds and there is a large amount of knowledge base was there in the general public. But similarly, for even any of your art form, if you take it from there are some something was there which is connected with based on they got this kind of art reflected from their observation of the birds in the nature. Similar, the most prominent thing when we talk about is the later years paintings, particularly that of Mughal emperors. Humayun, even this Jahangir is, even from Babur onwards, but Jahangir is well known for his special interest on this wildlife in general, particularly on birds. His one associate or his in the court, there was a person called Ustad Mansoor. He has several of the painting which we get nowadays available in the, it's all made by Ustad Mansoor. And if you just even that is many, if you read the books, which you can see that there are several people as a gift to him has brought so many kind of birds and animals from across the world, including one dodo somebody has presented, and that dodo, probably the most authentic drawing or painting of the dodo is here, which is made by Ustad Mansoor. So all these, all great, our understanding, observation on nature, but is it, I don't think we call that as ornithology. Ornithology, study of birds. Study of birds in the way we understand the modern science or the Western science. The history of ornithology, when we just start looking at it, it's actually dates back to the Linnaean. Actually, initial birds description was done by Linnaeus and Gmelin and all those people. Even it in the actually 17th century onward, people when start coming to India and collect so many things. Sometimes many of the bird specimens they have collected, more than the bird specimen, some of these drawings and paintings by people like several, this Mughal painting, and afterwards also they have the culture of painting, creating paintings and keeping was there. These paintings were initially you should understand that many of our wonderful birds were initially described for the science using the paintings, not by actually specimens or skins. So this is happened. Okay, sorry, it's not moving. Probably the first record, earliest record, account of the Indian birds was published in 1713 by Edward Berkeley. So he was a surgeon in Madras, and he has collected some 22 birds, made some paintings, and very close by in the St. Fort of Madras. And from that, one of the painting only, here the first, many of the initial description of the birds has happened. If you just start looking at the initial bird, this ornithologists, we can consider them into two. One is, of course, people who observe the nature and collecting from the field. The other one is actually whatever we collect and send to them, people who sit in the desk and making cabinet ornithologists, or actually more of a museum ornithologist. for a very initial part of our ornithology. India, the world, as the association was also presenting it, it is an initial part was dominated by mostly museum ornithologists and the collectors in the field also. So if you have to think about the early foundations of Indian ornithology, the first one already I told you, that is this Edward Berkeley, and that is the first 22 specimen he sent it. Then of course there are a large number of Indian avifauna. It is described in some 1558 to 1758 to almost one century by people by Linnaeus, Jemlin, Lantham, Temnick, and all these people from the collection which we sent from here, sitting there in the Europe. Then comes the next set of people who has started again coming and collecting the specimen here, the Sykes, Tickell, Franklin, and all these people. All these people who are well known through our bird names nowadays and for our Tickell and all those people. All these people are the basic initial collection and the information started. This collection, this people's collection and the knowledge actually paved way for the actual foundation of Indian ornithology, which we should has to ascribe to three major different people. Three actually triumvirate of either army related surgeons, officials, or somebody, police people, and all kind of people. His volume, The Birds of India, which is brought up primarily based on the knowledge of the earlier people as collected and his own collection, his own all these together made in the actually a beginning of Indian ornithology, we should say. Done a lot of collections and observations, and again communicating with the T.C. Jurgen and Edward Blyth. But he has worked in the western side as well as mainly Himalayan region, particularly very long period he has worked in Nepal. And of course, Hodgson was a very good friend, or he was interacting with Darwin and Hooker and all at that point of time. So the next person of the three people who are actually the parties, as people who are the central initial founders of Indian ornithology, we can call Edward Blyth. And Blyth and Georgian was more regularly interacting. They are regularly interacting rather than the Hodgson. Hodgson was right in an antagonistic relation with these two people. That's what literature says. I don't know. We don't know. But this Edward Blyth is a professional zoologist. He has lot of, he was a curator of Museum of Asiatic Society, Bengal. And then, in fact, some literature say he has, when interaction with, he has also connection with Darwin and all. He himself has, even Darwin's theory of natural selection is established even much before that. He has written about some sort of a same notion of natural selection in based on his observation in India. So these three people has created maybe paved the first basic base of Indian ornithology during the early period of the or we can say first phase of the 19th century, first half of the 19th century. Then comes the real hero. He has come into the later, the second half of the 19th century was actually dominated by Allen Octavian Hume. He was basically an administrator, politician, we can say. However, he's into so many things, but his special interest was on birds. And for the first time in India, he has started in 1872, started the journal called Stray Feathers. And that has become the major area where any observers, people who collectors, everybody can write the publish the ornithological knowledge of all these birds in Indian different provinces. Between 1872 to 1888, he has published lots of papers, published all information. Actually, it was flooding. And advantage of Allen Octavian Hume is that he had a very strong network of people who are collecting for him across the country. He has got, and he himself was collected, but more than that, he was actually collecting through different his networking people across the country, which he got a lot of specimen, and he has which almost something like 82,000 or something. Yeah, 82,000 some specimen he was there in his collection, which he has very meticulously made the initial base of Indian ornithology, we should say. There are several, even published several volumes of Game Birds of India and biology. Nest and nidification is another thing which is actually got a limelight into that period. And because of his contribution, this kind of a comprehensive contribution, he has been rightly referred as the father of Indian ornithology, or sometime in some books as a pope of Indian ornithology. So actually, at the end of during almost same period, last part of the through the our stray feathers and all other information available so far, but it is a monumental to actually it's a this fauna of British India, which came in between 89 to 90. That period, it came out as one of the major contribution. The next after Hume, the next major contribution to the knowledge advancement of Indian ornithology. Little later, Stuart Baker came and started working on it further in detail. That is considered to be one of the most highly advancement from what is happening in this Oates and Blandford, and it is come out with a very comprehensive work on the whole. Actually, he has made into another some 8 volumes of fauna of British India. The major part is actually in a proper further advancement of the Oates and Blandford's work. So this Stuart Baker's work has become a base for later Salim Ali's and Ripley's Handbook of Birds of India and Pakistan. People who worked with my guide, Dr. D.N. Matthew, when I joined for his PhD under him, he was always asking me to go and refer Stuart Baker's book. Not even that time, of course, handbook was there, but for him, for his younger age, he was mostly depending on Stuart Baker. That was, I was not understanding why he is always talking about Stuart Baker at that point of time. So he was such a market, some sort of impact Baker has made. After Baker, the major, actually, or after Baker, even before, even the late in the 19th century itself, in 1883, BNHS established, and BNHS, then 86, Journal of BNHS came into being. When 88, when our stray feathers stopped publishing, that people's publication of Indian ornithology has started, actually got divided into something more Britishers people, they started publishing in IBIS as well as the JBNHS. So JBNHS established, and almost in the first phase of 20th century, Zoological Survey of India got established. There are some very extraordinary people like Vishnoy Vishwas and all those people started working on ornithology in that area. But in the first half century of the 20th century was actually, there are 3-4 people to be mentioned. People like Douglas Dever, then, and of course, there are 2 people. Actually, Dr. Salim Ali, in his a couple of write-ups, he is very specifically telling that period can be considered or called as Tysart and Whistler era, because this Captain Claude Buchanan's Tysart, he was actually again a doctor in British, but he has again studied a lot of the whole coordinated across the country what he is that period. Also, another person is Hume Whistler. Whistler and Tysart were regularly interacting each other. They were coordinating with all the people who are collecting, working on across the country, and they have done the very, very commendable output. Particularly, probably the first handbook of the birds of India came by Whistler in 1928. And Whistler's, that is probably that's the first part. Much before our Salim Ali's Book of Indian Birds. So this period, the first half century of Indian ornithology is considered as I mean, half century of 20th century is considered the Tysert and Whistler era. And at the same time, this Kinnear, the Norman Kinnear, and he has come and took up as a curator of the Bombay Museum of Natural History. Actually, he only started, probably he would have written the first write-up about how the history of Indian ornithology also. The first, who are the first written and all he has written. From his writing only we are understanding who is the first, how the initial days of the Indian ornithology evolved. So then comes to the, actually, though Salim Ali started working in the first half of 20th century, but his establishment, actually, it is his outputs are started coming after the 1941. The first Book of Indian Birds have come, but he is the most charismatic ornithologist in this subcontinent. We call him Birdman of India. As Shashiatan has told here, he has his mentor. He called this Trustman as his mentor. He has done, and finally, with the delay, with collaborating with American ornithologists like Dillon Ripley, and has come up with a 10-volume of Handbook of Birds of India and Pakistan, for which he is very clearly saying in many places he has taken as a base of the thing is Stuart Baker's fauna of British India, but it is after 40 years after fauna, so it is actually a very big jump in all the knowledge, collected everything and brought it together into one. Though he has got a lot of awards, and most important thing beyond this knowledge base which he has brought everything, Salim Ali's, I would say, his Book of Indian Birds, the one which we call the next one, the Book of Indian Birds, and the way he popularized it, what made what we are now happening here. In India, ornithology is actually, even in his some memorial lecture he has given, he has written those days, now he has written an anxiety of his why bird watching is not improving in India like the way in the Europe. He was written, and what has to be done for to increase the bird watching in India, he has written very well in that. But when I joined to my PhD in Calicut University, the first book given by my guide to me is that this 1941 Birds of India and Pakistan. Birds of Book of Indian Birds. But till now, I say we have several editions has come. Now the latest editions are available. I would say that first edition, no, nothing like that. That's only 181 species. But on one side the photo, the other side the description, directly you can connect with you and with the bird and whatever writing. Very, very nicely made, wonderful book which has actually captured the imagination of all nature lovers of the country. Of course, his 10 volumes become the Bible of Indian ornithology. Still it is the Bible of Indian ornithology, nothing beyond that. Of course, information, knowledge, everything is going in a very big way, but that is different. Salim Ali collaborated with people like Ripley, working with Smithsonian Institution. He started coming and collaborating with Salim Ali, and he has a lot of contribution, but one of the major thing is that his synopsis, which is actually the basis of the chronologically the thing which is for the making the Handbook of India and Pakistan. Actually, and the late, his last days, and by the time she started working and started going up, then she only told me those days stories to me. And then then he passed away, and then by the time Pamela Rasmussen has got into the major issue of the Minarsagan fraud investigation, finally by the time the book, the Handbook of Asia, that it is now coming in her name and Pamela Rasmussen and Anderton who made the drawing. But he initiated that. Now I just want to do the next few people who are actually carried, people who worked with Salim Ali and in the same period, Humayun Abdul Ali, and many of the senior people are very, very well aware about him, and he was a taxonomist, and he was a cousin also. He is actually both of them, Humayun Abdul Ali as well as Zafar Faith Ali, was both of them relatives of Salim Ali, and their work, they continued working with him, learned, and many things they have. Actually, Humayun Abdul Ali systematized the collections of BNHS, and he made the major contribution in the BNHS collection to standardizing everything. Later on, Zafar Faith Ali, he again was working along with, started with Salim Ali's, and then
5 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. So after Zafar Faith Ali, he will be remembered for starting this newsletter for bird watchers, because BNHS has become more and more technical. Even it has to be reached to more people. So I just want to very quickly run through, just make some names of the people. I don't go into details. With this presentation I will be giving to you are just few people. Jesse George, who did in myology, and he actually established the PAVO, the journal. V.S. Vijayan, D.N. Matthew, Dr. Grubb, who has started working on the bird hazard projects, S.A. Hussain migration project, Asad Rahmani, though not directly under working, but later on he is also, we can say that he is a later director of BNHS has done. There are several scientists who worked, and that actually they did various aspects. That is the time after Salim Ali, there are several people who have done PhDs and several research work on various species and all. Now SACON, we have a National Ornithology Database cell. We have more than 600 PhD abstracts and details are available. Of which again, it is all the thing. Aligarh Muslim University and BNHS is not there in that. However, I just get you up. Then some regional leaders like Dharmakumar Singh ji in Gujarat, and Krishnan sir in Tamil Nadu, P.C. Bhattacharya and his students in Assam, and Prakash Kole in Maharashtra, and the greatest man, I don't need to talk anything about K.K. Nilan, anyway, Kerala. Indira sir, a special talk is going to be there. Then there are several people starting from Vishnu Vishwas, who worked with Salim Ali, from ZSI, continues, that legacy continues. There are women in Indian ornithology. There are people like, we can very rightly call bird woman of India, Jamal Ara, Tara Gandhi and Priya and all worked with Salim Ali, Usha in Northeast, and Pamela and Vijalida Vijayan, and the new, complete right side I have given a little, the new young women in the ornithology. This one anyway I just briefly said, this is a well-known fraud in Indian ornithology, sort of a stealing and misidentifying or during this period, established during this period. And then there are some papers, very quickly, just run through the papers. Ranjit Daniel, just on only the landmark papers which are putting. Ranjit Daniel's paper on the relationship of wood diversity with the bird, and then Shankaraman Hume cultivation is very another interesting path. And simple papers like very excellent deep papers, Suhail Kader's paper on what makes a good nest, that kind of a very simple thing. And then of course our Raman Kumar and Gasala, their paper on this. Again, the people are here. This on the mixer flooding flock. There are two, three papers come. Very specifically, all these papers are our Robin and our Vishnu and your paper. Then these are the journals which actually made the history through the history of India. When you talk about bibliography, Ashish Pitti is the best, or what is available, the only thing available. Then come to the kind of books which came out during this period. A series of wonderful field guides now makes the things. Very quickly, there is a time lineage from starting with, if you can look at it, whatever I have just said can be very well. It come to up to 2000. After 2000, this 21st century, there are several new descriptions were there. All these birds are new description for Indian ornithology. And of course, there are new rediscoveries, which I don't want to quickly run through because of the time. Then there are a few areas where Salim Ali was concerned in the last years. One is about migration. Initially, it was only based on ringing. Nowadays, it has evolved it to satellite image.
Please conclude.
Just over, sir. Then there is another thing which Salim Ali was very much concerned was agricultural ornithology. Actually all India network project on agricultural ornithology, coordinated work which was coming with a lot of output knowledge, tree aviation. And another thing is this way the conferences through which the knowledge is propagated. There are several conferences starting from BNHS conference, SACON several, and there are nowadays the eBird and their group are making amazing localized conferences which is transforming this knowledge into it. Now the modern world has started with a new way of modern classification of Indian birds. The knowledge is increasing, and there are two papers I wanted to make a very landmark publication which came this year's century, which makes actually practical use. One is Praveen and that checklist, which is everybody is using, making a lot of things clear what actually how to do. Similarly, the latest Birds of India, which is actually helping us to feel in the field to make a clarity of. Just to last 2 slides, 2-3 slides, just from now the bird watching is transforming from the bird watching to a more citizen science, more systematically collecting data, which can a long-term observation of the bird, how that is actually, and it is involving bird race and all those. The last, I just would like to then my guide, dear Matthew, Dr. Ramakrishnan Parat, who gave me the bird, this is your topic, you take it up. That's the way I came into the world of birds. And Shandaram. When I started my work, for 1 year I was doing bird watching without knowing, understanding anything. Then I went and stayed with him for 1 month. That made a lot of difference in my life. And of course, Professor Gadgil, throughout my 5 years with him, every day he'll keep on asking me, penetrate question after question after question. That makes my way of looking at the birds in a totally different way. And of course, Pam, with her, I have worked for about 6 months in Michigan, which gave me an understanding about how to look the acoustics of the bird. I am thankful to all of these people to make me stand here and talking to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod, for that wonderful presentation on the history of Indian ornithology. His paper started from the knowledge base on birds of India, starting from epics and mythology, then birds in literature, especially Sanskrit and Mughal painting, then early works in ornithology by the Britishers, founders of modern Indian ornithology, like birds like Blythe, Jordan, Hodgson. Then he has concluded with Indian ornithology in the 20th century by the people none other than Salim Ali and Dylan Ripley, and he has continued with the legacy of Salim Ali and concluded with the current status of Indian ornithology. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Now let's move on to the third presentation. Meanwhile, let me remind the volunteers to by via citizen science in India. Please, Ashwin Vishnu.
Hello? Yeah, can everybody see a slide on the screen? Yeah. How many people in the room have already seen this slide? Must be a number of people. That's it? Okay, how many people have already heard a talk about State of India's birds? No. Okay, so I will not be talking about either of these things. I'll just go through a couple of slides as an introduction of sorts. So this map that you see is a map of all birding locations uploaded on eBird at the moment. And you can see it covers almost the entire country. There are some places with a huge amount of birding, and every corner of the country has somebody who's gone and made a checklist. And of course, there are many more people now interested in birds, so soon all of these gaps will also be filled. But something like this amazing huge data set has made possible a lot of learning recently. So this general e-birding, general bird monitoring by the public has become really vital for bird monitoring. And it's made possible reports like the State of India's birds. So what this graph, for example, shows is that if you look at different diet groups of birds, birds that eat fruit and nectar seem to have remained somewhat stable in the last 25 years. And many other groups of birds that eat insects, that eat prey, all of them are declining, especially insect-eating birds. So these kinds of insights are possible now, and this is there are a number of such results in the State of India's Birds report. But how are such graphs produced? So we have this vast data, it's all uploaded, accessible to all of us, but how can we make sense of it? How are such graphs made? So for example, over here, again, you see that birds that are generalists, that don't have any specialization, are stable. Other birds are declining. We all, how many people here use eBird, make checklists? Large proportion of the room. So when we make a checklist, what do we have on a checklist? We have a set of birds, we have some numbers over there, right? How can we use that to actually see what has changed over time in the country? So think about it now. Let's say that today a bunch of us are making checklists over here. 5 years back, some other checklists were made. Now, how can we use these checklists? It's not clear numbers, right, that are changing. We're not getting a total count of birds. How are we able to actually understand how things have changed? So this is with a calculation called frequency of reporting. The way it is calculated is that we're not looking at the numbers on the checklist. We're not looking at a count of 5, a count of 10. We're looking at whether a bird is present on the checklist or not present on the checklist. So let's say that today, we make checklists here and we find Indian peafowl. I don't know whether it's there in Calcutta. Maybe it hasn't reached yet. But let's say some other place. 50% of checklists have Indian peafowl, right? So that might be species B. Let's say 3 out of 5 checklists. So what you have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are checklists. Then you have species A, B, C, D, E. Species B is there on 3 out of 5 checklists. Species C is there on 2 out of 5 checklists. Now let's say species B, we're looking at how many checklists it was there in 10 years back or 20 years back. Now we look at all the checklists around Calcutta and we see that 20 years back, 0 out of 100 checklists had Indian peafowl. So that gives an indication that Indian peafowl has increased from 0 to 60% in the last 20 years. So now this is the concept, but it is complicated, because this is a data set that is very difficult to analyze. Now, what is the difference between checklist today and the checklist 20 years back? It'd be great if people can answer. Anything. What is different between today and 20 years back? The number of checklists. Anything else that has changed about the kind of checklists we have today versus earlier? So today we may have shorter checklists. We may have something 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Previously, maybe 20 years back, we may not have mentioned the amount of time, but it usually wasn't 15 minutes. So that's one of many things that has changed. What you see on this map over here, it also gives another clue as to why this data is very difficult to analyze. But before we discuss this, we'll look at Kerala. So this is a map of locations in Kerala from 2015 to 2019. I'll explain why I use those years. I think many people will already be able to guess the answer, right? Okay, so 2015 to 2019, we're looking at all the general checklists uploaded in the state of Kerala. Can somebody tell me why it becomes difficult if I want to look at the most common bird in Kerala from this map? Right? I want to take all of these checklists. I want to look at the most common bird in Kerala. Why will it be difficult from this? Anybody? Sorry? Yeah, let's say I just want to look at the most common bird at that point. I want to look at the frequency of reporting of all birds in Kerala for this period, 2015 to 2019, I want to look at it. And I want to say that this is the most common bird in Kerala. Why is that difficult? Yeah? Yes, that's one thing. Not all checklists are complete. But something else from the map, the distribution of points. What do we see? I don't know, whichever the most well-birded areas are. right? So that is a problem. Now, if we want to take this and compare this over time, let's say that 20 years back, the way the state of Kerala would have been covered will be different. It need not be the same places that have all of the birding today. That need not be the same places that had all of the birding 20 years back. So when you're analyzing it and getting a number, frequency, it becomes a little difficult, right? So that is one of the problems. But there are many other things that make this data set very difficult. Like we discussed, variable checklist F Indian peafowl. Now what is happening? In 15-minute checklist, many 15-minute checklists, you will not find Indian peafowl. So what will happen? Now we have 10 15-minute checklists. Out of that, only 5 of them peafowl is there. And previously we walked there are 3 checklists that are full day long. And in those full days, every time at some point Indian peafowl was found. So then what will we have? 100% Indian peafowl 20 years back, 50% Indian peafowl today. So we will conclude then saying that Indian peafowl has decreased in Wayanad. So that will be a flawed conclusion. So we need to be able to find a way to avoid that. Is everybody clear about this problem of how this effort makes such a big difference? And then we have some sites also, even within a smaller area, let's say in Wayanad district, there'll be some sites that have a lot of birding, some sites that have very little birding, some sites that don't have birding at all. Correct? So that variation is also there. And then we also have an entire, the birdwatcher community is extremely diverse. There are always people who are learning, there are always people who are experienced. And checklists are being made by everybody across the spectrum. People who are just beginning, making their first checklist, people who have been birding for 20, 30 years. So there'll be an entire variety of experience leading to mistakes in checklists, or also leading to different detections of difficult species, right? So this entire variation is there. So now, how can we address this via some statistics? Okay. So this is where the Kerala Bird Atlas has played a really vital role. So before SOIB could be done, State of India's birds could be done, and this kind of analysis could be completed, there needed to be some gold standard to compare this against. And I'll explain how that was done. So what you see here, on the left side, you see the map that I showed from 2015 to 19 of general birding, generally birding in Kerala. The amazing map that you see on the right, is everybody able to see it? Yeah? It is the map of the Kerala Bird Atlas checklist. You see that all of this clustering is gone. It is completely even across space. There are a couple of holes there. That is my fault. Please ignore those. I'm not entirely sure where they came from. But overall, you see that it is homogeneously birded. There are no sites that have more birding than any other site. There are no districts that have any more than any other site. So you can say that if you take an average now for this data set, the Kerala Bird Atlas data set, you can say that yes, this is how common this bird is. This is the most common bird in Kerala. Now what we need to do is find a method that brings this checklist, this data set, the general eBird data set, and make it align with what we are finding from the atlas. And then that method can then be taken forward to analyze data for India, general eBird data, where this gold standard is not there, and we have data over time. Kerala Bird Atlas, we have a snapshot. Now, of course, if the atlas is repeated, we can say what has happened, as it declined, as it increased. But this is a snapshot. But general eBird data, we have this entire data set, this time series. So how can that be done? So we need a statistical method that allows us to do something like this. On the x-axis, we have frequencies from the Kerala Bird Atlas, right? Let's say that each of these points is one species. The point at 50% is white-cheeked barbet. So on Atlas says that white-cheeked barbet is there in 50% of the checklist. Its abundance is, frequency of reporting is 50%. What we need from most common bird, this bird as a second most common, even from the general eBird data analysis. So this allows us to calibrate, find a statistical method that makes it make sense. We're able to align with that gold standard. Right, that's clear to everyone? If there are any questions at this stage, let me know. Any broader questions we can take later. Right, so how was that done? So now we have this frequency of reporting for, I think, a couple of hundred species from the Kerala Bird Atlas. All of those numbers are there on the x-axis. Now there are various statistical methods that you try to see which one of them actually aligns in a straight line. So some of these methods, the first graph that you see on the top left is actually just a raw frequency. You just take eBird data and you like for the atlas, you just look at what percentage of checklist or what proportion of checklist is that species therein. And you see in the first graph, actually there's a lot of scatter. There are species that go here and there, and they're not very close to the line. So what is our objective? To find a method that pushes it close to the line. Fine. Then one of the biggest biases in general eBird data is what we spoke about, clustering. So now, how do we take care of clustering? So that is done using a generalized mixed effects model. For those of you who do any statistics here, what it allows is that you take the entire country and you divide it into grids. Then each of those grids actually become random effects in the model. What that means is that effectively you're averaging across all of the grids, and no single grid will get more importance than any other grid. So every Kerala and the entire country is divided into 25 by 25 kilometer grids. So every 25 by 25 kilometer grids, how much ever data it has in it, gets equal weightage. So it's not that if one place has a huge amount of birding, that place will become the dominant place for the frequency, for the abundance. So we see that a model, the fifth one over here, the one right in the middle, where there is an effort variable and there is this mixed effects model. That is the one that brings it closest to the line from a number of different statistical possibilities. This effort variable here is something called list length. So the number of species in the checklist. So if you have 10 species in the checklist, it means that your probability of getting a certain species is low. If you have 50 species on the checklist, the probability of you getting a Malabar grey hornbill, let's say, increases. So you can look at the number of species on the checklist and you can say that, okay, based on this number, this is what I expect the probability or the frequency of reporting of that species to be. So how does this help? Now what we then do is we have the checklist from 20 years back that have maybe 60, 70, 80 species. We have the checklist from today that have 10, 20 species because they're short all the time. Then in monsoon, everybody goes quiet, typically. But what do we want? We want to know what is the average. Right? So again, we can find a way to also standardize to season so that we are able to get the frequency of reporting to average season. Right? So that also can be done using this statistical model. So now we know that, okay, this is the model, the framework that best fits the gold standard, which is the Kerala Bird Atlas data. And therefore, we can use this approach to analyze data for the entire country. And it's worked extremely well in as far as we understand. But this method could only be developed because of a gold standard that existed. So this is one of the many advantages of systematic monitoring. And this talk now mostly is about systematic monitoring and the many benefits it provides. General e-birding is extremely valuable, but we are in a state today in the country where now I'll ask some, okay, first this graph. So what do we have in the Kerala Bird Atlas data? As in any systematic monitoring approach, we have sites that are not clustered in space. We have constant checklist effort. Birding at each point is equal, and there's at least one experienced birder typically in each team. So systematic monitoring will allow for a comprehensive state of India's birds. What we have now, I'd like you to say, can somebody tell me what are the gaps at the moment that we have in the state of India's birds? So we spoke about systematic monitoring providing that gold standard. What else does it provide, and are these gaps, can they be addressed in some way through systematic monitoring? Everybody here is familiar with State of India's birds now. I mean, a large proportion of the group. There is also a stall, and people can stop by and scan that and get more familiar if you'd like to. And there's some other stuff also. There's stickers and other things at the stall. But for those of you who have already read the report, who have engaged with this analysis, can some of you tell me what is it missing? What is State of India's birds missing? Anybody? I think, Pankaj, there'll be one obvious miss, right? Nocturnal birds. So nocturnal birds is a very obvious miss. And the way that general birding happens, the way we make our checklist, the way we do our birding, it may be a long time before through our general birding we'll ever be able to document and monitor nocturnal birds. Does everybody agree with that, or broadly? Anything else? Anyone? What else are we missing in State of India's birds? Yeah? I'm sure all the Kannur people again have an idea, people who do a certain kind of birding, maybe not Wayanad, pelagics. So we are missing out on sea watching, I mean on coastal and pelagic birds mostly, right? So how do we do pelagic monitoring? Maybe not through a general e-birding, right? Maybe we need some other approach. Anything else? Anybody? What else are we missing? Sure, all the answers are there in people's minds, but season? Yeah. So we're missing certain seasons, or missing certain places. Anything else? So yeah, we spoke about a couple of them. We missed certain groups of birds that cannot be monitored or are difficult to monitor. Nocturnal birds, pelagic birds, and even birds like passage migrants that pass through for a small period. But the way our birding happens, we are not focusing on them. So we don't have protocols that are focused on passage migrant birds. Then of course there are birds that are very hard to detect. So Banasura laughing thrush, general birding. Probably not, right? Big bird. Then we have habitats, sky islands, etc. that are very hard to reach. And high Himalaya, extremely tough to reach, tough parts of the city. Let's say Bangalore city where it's only buildings and there's nothing else, people aren't really monitoring it. In the same way that they're monitoring the wetlands, monitoring the open areas around. Beaches, another habitat where in typical birding, certain beaches only may get monitored and many beaches may be left out. Right? Sorry? Okay. Anything else that I've missed here? Any important habitats that are not being monitored typically? No? Okay. And then we also need more such gold standards, atlases, other initiatives at site and larger levels where at any point these analysis can be calibrated, can be checked, and we can make sure that things are not going wrong. So luckily now we've had this entire this wave of systematic monitoring efforts that's extremely important now so that we get a more comprehensive SOIB. Nocturnal birds, I've put a question mark because we don't yet have a large-scale nocturnal bird monitoring initiative. There was an attempt made in Kerala, and I don't know how that has proceeded, but I think it would be really nice to think of some way to start monitoring nocturnal birds. Because aside from owls, even nightjars, good indicators of ecosystems, eat insects and eat arthropods, and might be really important to start monitoring. So we need to find some way to monitor them. But there are so many amazing efforts happening in the state, including the Sea Watch, beach combing, then raptor monitoring, etc. Passage migrant count in Gujarat has been a really successful event that has gone on for years, focused entirely on passage migrants using a fixed protocol. Then we don't have anything yet at this scale for birds that are hard to detect, like pheasants. And one of the important things, one of the things here is that actually now there are enough birders, enough people with experience who can participate in such initiatives. So systematic monitoring initiatives can happen with public participation and without public participation. Some of them can work really well without public participation, assuming you're looking at a site level, you're looking at some kind of site level monitoring, like what Tarun does and Tarun's team does in Eagle Nest, and that continues, that will continue, but they're monitoring demographics or what is survival of birds at different elevations at a single site. But the moment you want to scale this up to a larger level, you want to scale monitoring up to a larger region, might need some kind of public participation. So I'm speaking about efforts that involve or can involve public participation. Then we have all the forest surveys, again a number of them that have happened, sky island monitoring, beach combing, etc. All of the city atlases are monitoring built up areas. Many opportunities to start systematic monitoring efforts of different kinds with different protocols around the country, and there are various groups that can of course help with give technical inputs, including KBM, and if any more initiatives are going to be started. But we all know that we can keep having systematic monitoring initiatives, we can keep coming up with new things, but we all understand that there is a big gap in that there are more and more people who need to engage with the analysis and writing and programming. And if many people actually start looking at this, at both systematic collected data and general birding data, there's a huge amount of knowledge that we can gain as a community, and conservation can be sped up rapidly. There's at least one video on how to analyze eBird data on Bird Count India YouTube. I recommend everybody takes a look, starts getting into it, and get your hands dirty for the analysis. Using things that you can do with visualization. That's all I have. Yeah, and
clustering by doing passage migrants places like condition of the session.
Good afternoon to all, and first of all, thank taught many things about heronries early itself. In this presentation, I'll be just heronries. In Malayalam, no, like in English also. We also call pelicanaries. Basically, those are breeding sites for Salim Ali in 1996. He used heronries. Before independence, there were so many informing that there are species being a new nest being formed and all. Ecological studies until now also there are only few ecological studies nesting there, and he have very well boundaries and irrigation canals. They were breeding records of little egrets mostly. Informations about how the birds were or what was the status of the bird. We have everywhere we have night herons, but in 1980s night herons were uncommon. So questions about stocks, egrets, cormorants, everything together. So, and there were a group called Yahoo group, Kerala compilation. There were so many informations. Basically, again a comparison. Like we could get an idea from that earlier record. We'll be also focusing on the species. So 2005 was the first 10, 11, 12 they have done. Actually, comparing to other states which doesn't have much data, Kerala can proudly say that, and little egrets. You can see who coming to the next part into the citizen science. You find heronries everywhere actually. Earlier, even on mobile towers, electric towers. Some of the started that we'll all take up this the Malabar, like because Shashimar sir was doing his heronry somewhere. They'll have to call us and inform. So these have helped us a lot getting new news part of citizen science, because without them like this would have not been possible. What we have done was collecting these heronry details. So these so what we do is that we data. This is just basically on 10 years, but we do have 13-year data now. So we have district-wise number for 10 years. We have these two species being very regular in Kerala the year. Night heron, little bit like it's going stable, but pond herons, what we find is it's so we basically focus during July and August. We are finding it more also in our wetlands. So little cormorant breeding was not recorded during Salim Ali's trade between cormorants, little cormorant and the shag. History about the cormorants, and when it comes to greater 1980s, according to Nilakanta, and that Kerala, most of the nests are found in Thrissur,